This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Yesterday's unusual heat broke a weather record in St. Louis. The high was 76 degrees, a stark contrast to today's temperature and certainly to that streak of never-ending icy roads that folks in the city of St. Louis experienced. But yesterday's record high offered a glimpse of the warmer months ahead, and as a segue into our next segment, outdoor patio dining. Previously on this program, we've talked about restaurant openings and closings, and here to do that with us today are two of my STL PR colleagues. Jessica Rogan is St. Louis Public Radio's digital editor. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
And also with us is Abby Larico, morning anchor and host of the Gateway podcast. Hi to you as well.
Hi, Elaine.
So before we get to some restaurants that opened in January, let's talk about some that closed. And we'll begin in the Loop. Abby, tell us about the Peacock Loop Diner in University City.
Yeah, this is one that if you are ever in that area, you'd recognize it by the sign. It's got that great glowing neon sign that is of a peacock, quite recognizable. It was actually named Best New Sign in the World about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
It's a Joe Edwards fixture, so he's the developer behind so much of the U-City Loop, including Blueberry Hill. They made the decision not to renew their lease. The 10-year diner tended to feel much older and more vintage than that, but they decided to not renew there in the Del Mar Loop space. Hopefully whoever comes in next keeps that sign, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's quite something to hang on to as far as history is concerned. Jessica, another restaurant that closed was a brunch spot, Simply Delicious, and that was located in downtown St. Louis on Pine. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Simply Delicious was from chef Brandy Artis, and it was her Creole brunch daytime spot located in downtown, and the restaurant made an announcement that it was closing because of the negative impact of crime in that area. And we do know that, crime is down broadly in the city, but, she was still feeling like she was seeing the impact on her sales. Mm-hmm. However, if people are sad about missing her food, you can simply go down to City Foundry because she also owns Four Hens Creole Kitchen.
Oh, okay.
And our lucky neighbors in Chicago should be seeing a opening of Simply Delicious there sometime in the future, she said.
So we'll just have to travel a little bit further to get to this food.
Just a tiny bit.
Yeah. Now, speaking of traveling, let's go out to St. Charles and talk about Schlafly Bankside in St. Charles. Abby, this was part of the Schlafly Empire. Mm-hmm. The tap room in St. Louis is still open, as is Schlafly Bottle Works in Maplewood. So what is it that prompted the closure of the St. Charles location?
So this is another situation where the lease the lease comes up. A lot of people don't realize these restaurants don't own, in most instances, these restaurants don't own the buildings in which they are housed. And so the landlord, the owner of the building where Schlafly Bankside has resided, decided that they needed to work on some improvements to the building. So they did not give Schlafly the option to renew, according to Schlafly. The building needs some improvements. This was a longtime home for beer lovers and people who wanted to gather around a pint on Main Street, St. Charles, though, but because before it became Schlafly Bankside, it was Trailhead Brewing. As a St. Charles native, plenty of time spent hanging out, having food down there. But the Schlafly folks have said this is not necessarily the end. They've really enjoyed being part of the, not just St. Charles community, but that historic Main Street community. So their post on Facebook alluded to some possible reopening announcements in that area in the future.
Okay. There's another closure that's happening, and this is a coffee shop. This is Quarrelsome Coffee in St. Louis's Central West End neighborhood. Jessica, what is behind Quarrelsome Coffee's closure?
So we actually don't know why Quarrelsome Coffee is closing. So Quarrelsome Coffee was co-owned by Mark Shorts, who owns Omega Yeast Company, which is actually a craft brewing supplier. So there's another connection there. Quarrelsome was doing something very interesting. They were using those yeasts to ferment the coffee cherries and unlocking these new different flavors in their special strains with the yeast inoculations. It had been in the Central West End for, I think, under 2 years at this point. And Connor James was heading up their coffee program. However, late last year, Omega Yeast was acquired. And because that building actually was owned by Omega Yeast, I don't know. I don't want to say this is why, but you have to wonder if there's some connection to the company getting acquired and then the coffee shop no longer being run.
Yeah. Well, and craft breweries have been struggling quite a bit of late.
That's one that, in a short time, by the way, Quarrelsome became a hot spot. A lot of people are really affected by the closure of a place that hasn't been open for that long, relatively speaking, because what they were doing there was pretty cool, and it really felt like a transformative, or not transformative, it felt like you were somewhere outside of St. Louis.
Transportational.
Yes, something. I see clearly someone needs coffee right now.
It was always super packed inside, and it was a really beautiful renovation they did on that space. It had been the Block, but it had been closed for 2 years before Quarrelsome opened, and before that it was Tureen, and they really made it this very beautiful, modern, open space, and hopefully something else will open in there.
Yeah. Well, and as far as what Quarrelsome was offering, I mean, St. Louis certainly has its comeback story, so perhaps we'll see a revival of it somewhere else. Now, let's get to some of the new places that have opened. Jessica, I want to talk with you about a spot in Clayton. This is Flight Club, which does not have the first rule, which is not to talk about Flight Club. So tell us what you can about this new spot.
Okay, glad I'm not breaking any taboos. So Flight Club is actually a darts club. Darts and I would say kind of gastropub-like food with a cocktail-heavy drink menu. And it is from London, where it was founded in 2015, and now it's in Clayton. You play darts using kind of a fiber optic system, so it purports to be super accurate.
Like the Top Golf of darts, maybe?
Exactly.
Okay. And this is one that has just opened?
It has just opened. Their tagline is that they're a social darts club. So I think the idea is, it's not just about the game, it's about the experience.
Mm-hmm. Are the darts sharp?
I don't think so.
Okay, just thinking about mixing alcohol and darts. I think
Yes,
that's
that sounds.
to be thinking
Well,
about.
and speaking of mixing, this dining and drinking and sports. I mean, we've talked on the show before about pickleball concepts that combine dining with activities. And then there was the Armory, which is now shuttered. Abby, what do you make of this seeming trend in combining the comestibles with activity?
I think that if it gives us the opportunity to use the word comestibles, love that. But I love it even more for giving people a reason to go out. I think that's one of the big trends we're going to be seeing, whether that's through these highly experiential, curated, small table, fine dining experiences that people can have, or something where you have an activity, socializing. The restaurant scene has changed so much in the past 4+ years. And I think that in 2015, the gathering in real life with people is going to be a big thing. And places like this, I think, are tapping into that trend.
Mm-hmm. Well, somewhere that people do gather, not on purpose to do something together, is the airport. Now, folks are probably not accustomed to meals that are worth writing home about in a positive way that are located at the airport. Tell us about Peacemaker Lobster and Crab and Four Hands Brewing.
At the airport, at St. Louis Lambert International Airport in Terminal 2. First thought might not be what everybody think. People might not initially think, right, about seafood as a thing to eat at the airport. But we're talking about really good seafood, so there is that. Hopefully people let their friends and family know who are traveling in and out of St. Louis that, yes, we get the good stuff here. And also the connection being our seafood that we do have at higher quality establishments here, like Peacemaker, is flown in.
Right. Okay.
So it kind of makes some sense, right, to have a location like this. And then, of course, the coupling with Four Hands, we're seeing that pairing of Four Hands and Peacemaker Lobster and Crab in other spaces. So to have a great introduction at the airport with Four Hands Brewery for our visitors or people traveling through St. Louis kind of does make sense. I was talking to someone who does work at another spot in the airport. They said it's been a little slow for the Peacemaker Four Hands folks who are in that, by the way, old Pasta House Schlafly space at the end of the terminal there. But probably a good thing they're getting their operations in order before spring break travel season. We know is going to be pretty busy.
Yeah. So then you need to go through security in order to get to this restaurant?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes, you do.
So it's a lobster on lockdown in some way.
And I imagine they have different utensils and things that they have to be using to prepare these things because preparing food at the airport requires different rules for the kitchen and whatnot. So it could be kind of interesting to peek back inside there.
So let's come back closer to where we are in Grand Center and go to City Foundry in St. Louis. And there are two places to talk about as far as openings this month. The first one is Pop Pop Hooray, which I think is very difficult to say without smiling. Jessica, tell us about that one.
So Pop Pop Hooray is a gourmet popcorn shop. You can make a bowl of different flavors of popcorn. So like they've got wild flavors like key lime pie, as well as your traditional like butter, cheese, etc. And it's owned by Tony Davis. The first one was still in Ferguson. On Florissant. Davis got a big accelerator grant a few years ago, $50,000, and has just used that to expand his concept drastically, and now to City Foundry.
Yeah, and they've got a location in St. Charles too, I think.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of popping going on. Now, there's another in City Foundry, another spot that that you did a feature on, in fact, Jessica, that aired yesterday, and that's Sweet Art 2, and that's TOO, not TWO. The owner of that is Rain Keys, who for many years has had her shop in St. Louis's Shaw neighborhood. Let's take a listen to a little of what Rain told you.
I love when someone comes up and they're having a miserable day and you can just tell. And then you say, here's a cookie. And whoever did it, we don't like them either. And they just smile and you make their whole day better. You probably can't do that in an office setting. There's something about food and creating food and exchanging food and smiling at folks and interacting that is not like any other industries.
Again, that's Rain Keys, the owner of Sweet Art. Jessica, what were your biggest takeaways from spending time with Rain?
Yeah, so Rain is expanding after a really long time in Shaw. One of the things that we talked about was she felt like she had to make a move to get bigger, or she had to contract because, as we were talking about earlier, dining culture has changed so much since really COVID. And she decided that she'd rather get big than get small. And right. So, she had said no to the Foundry before and decided, now was the moment. And she's in that little corner by the pizza place and Sureste. And she will also be moving the main Sweetheart to the Coronado building right by SLU in Midtown.
Which is a very short walk from where we are. So this is very sweet news indeed. Why is it that she's moving there? Is it just really about space?
It was about space, and the kitchen there was turnkey. And it's, she is a beloved vegan restaurant in the Shaw neighborhood, but not much foot traffic. And, this neighborhood has the Fox, it has, the museums, there's a lot of apartment buildings. There is SLU students, although she said she was not relying on students.
Okay. Interesting.
But, there is going to be a lot more potential for more customers here.
Mm-hmm. And as we wrap, we can't end this show without previewing something I'm sure that we'll talk about in next month's edition of this segment, and that's the announced closing of the fine dining restaurant Tony's in Clayton. So, Abby, Tony's is such an institution in this area. What is it that you can tell us about this one?
Well, Elaine, last time we were chatting on the show, it was about that Michelin star story I did, and the number of people who said, wait, doesn't Tony's have a Michelin star? It is highly acclaimed. It has long been considered the measuring stick for fine dining in St. Louis. They moved from downtown to Clayton in 2021. They announced that they are going to close after February 15th, giving people plenty of time to use up those gift cards, maybe have one more Tony's experience. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of eulogizing to go around for that because it's a St. Louis institution, truly.
Abby Llorico is morning anchor and host of the Gateway podcast, and Jessica Rogan is St. Louis Public Radio's digital editor. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Always.
Thank you.
You can see a list of all of the restaurants we've talked about by visiting our website. That's stlpr.org/new restaurants.
Today's episode was produced by our executive producer, Alex Hoyer.
Recorded by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Llorico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.